a day, I live in a dream. I live in a dream.
Welcome to Only Trying to Help, the podcast where we try to help you be helpful to other people. Folks, no surprise that season after season, I like to bring back some of our favorites. So we've got Elizabeth and Meg here. How are you doing, folks?
I'm doing all right. We're recording this on Super Bowl Sunday, so let's see how I feel tonight. But today, I'm doing well and excited to be here with you all. Thank you.
Okay. I think it's safe on this podcast to say go Birds. If Kansas City doesn't like it, tough. This is a go Birds kind of podcast. We're not going to hide who we're in favor of here. My whole wall behind me is green. Meg, you're wearing green. Elizabeth, it looks that might be a shade of green you're wearing, like a dark green. How are you doing?
I'm wearing a traditional hunter green for the Eagles because that's the green I recall from our youth. We are all three grew up in Delaware County. We're Delco girls for life, so go Birds. And I am fine. I was just telling my colleagues that I have been sick, but so has everyone else in America, it feels like. So I feel at one with everyone.
Well, all right. Yes, podcast in the spirit of solidarity. I like it. Thanks. So I reached out to both of you knowing that I needed your wisdom. The three of us have already done an episode or two on this topic of boundaries. Now, that's not really what I asked you to talk about today, but I do think there's like a little bit of overlap, and maybe we'll even borrow a little bit from what we've once said before about boundaries. Today, though, I asked you if you'd be willing to share a little bit about the idea of accountability. I think it's a tricky word in some ways. Oftentimes when a person will say like, well, I'm trying to hold you accountable, there's something about that might feel a little like dominating or authoritarian, or like somebody's higher than me or in charge of me. And yet I think accountability for one another can be really important. It can be even kind of beautiful when it's done well. And I think it could be helpful for our audience to hear about, because I also hear from a whole group of people who say, well, I'm a really helpful person, so I get taken advantage of all the time. It's like these kind of extremes of holding people accountable or getting taken advantage of all the time. And there's so much space in the middle where we could be living. And that's where I thought I would call upon each of you to chat with me about that. So how do we help people in this world while also maybe holding them accountable in some compassionate ways and making sure that we're not being taken advantage of? Thoughts from either of you?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is who do we think we're accountable to, right? So depending on, we all have different roles in our life, right? I'm a wife and a mother and a therapist and a Girl Scout leader and a church member, whatever, fill in the blank. And so all these different roles, I'm accountable to different people sometimes different governing bodies when it comes to my work and to my volunteer gigs. Um, and so when I think about accountability, I think about the sort of formal accountability of there are rules and guidelines we have to follow based on different roles. But also there's the sort of like personal accountability, like what does my family expect of me? What do my friends expect of me? What do my clients expect of me? All that is all those people I'm accountable to, right? In addition to being accountable for myself.
I love that. And I also think about, in addition to that, that to the community and to those broader organizations, that how do I be accountable to myself can be a really important question to ask. And sometimes that softens that feeling of being chastised or lectured at that can sometimes come when somebody says, hey, I'm holding you accountable. If we are in a place where we want to grow and make sure that our behavior is aligned with our values and our ethics, instead of that feeling like an uncomfortable experience, it can be an experience for growth and opportunity. And I feel like that's particularly possible if you're in touch with what your ethics are and how you hope to navigate the world. And so that can just kind of land you in a softer place when you're hearing things that can sometimes feel vulnerable or difficult.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm enjoying the imagery of land you in a softer place. Yeah. So that's good. Thank you for that. I think we're already heading in a really useful direction, and it's made me think about friend of mine, I like to make up names. Let's call her Jessica. But this is a real friend. I'm just making up the name part. Jessica said to her husband this year that she wanted to work out more and eat healthier in hopes of losing some weight. And then Jessica decided one night, "Oh, I think I'd like to treat myself to a bowl of ice cream." Okay, no big deal, having her ice cream. And her husband walks in and says, "I think I need to hold you accountable here." And sorry, I'm watching your faces. Good faces. But let me finish the story. But love your faces. He said, "I think I need to hold you accountable here. You said that you want to eat healthier foods, exercise more with the hope of maybe losing a little bit of weight. And I walk in the room and you're eating ice cream. And I think I need to hold you accountable." Well, Jessica calls me, well, why don't you guess? In what mood or tone did Jessica call me? Somebody?
Was she pissed, Kate?
Rage, right? Rage. So Jessica calls me enraged and is like, "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. This wasn't what I was setting up when I let him in on what my goal was. Who the hell is he to say to me that I can't have ice cream?" Of course, obviously, all the things I would have said if someone had done that to me. And I think this is an example of where the word accountability gets weaponized. Like sometimes we appoint ourselves and say, "I'm going to hold you accountable," when you haven't been asked to do that. She did not ask him, "Hey, can you hold me accountable?" Now, I'll tell you, there have been not that many moments in my life, maybe two or three, when I've asked a person, "I think I want you to hold me accountable." Usually I'm like, "Don't you dare hold me accountable." But a few times in my life, I have requested accountability. That's different. That's different. So we're talking about one kind now, where like someone says, "I've decided I'm going to hold you accountable," and it really doesn't go well. Then there's like the other side where we maybe let people do things to us or treat us in ways that are disrespectful without holding them accountable. And to the point that both of you have made, in those moments, I think we are accountable to ourselves to require a certain level of respect and dignity. And that's when I do think we can hold people accountable, because we are accountable to how we allow ourselves to be treated.
I love that. I think about the world of online dating, which I am in. And this is a really great example because you're getting to know people. You're also thinking about usually what you want and hope for your life as you're doing this, and kind of in a hopeful place that like this person you meet is going to be doing that too. And you're also in a space of kind of assessing their behavior to see if like over time, is this something that makes sense? So there's opportunity for feedback like, "Hey, I really like it when you XYZ," or "I don't like ABC." And then you have to check in with yourself. So if I tell someone, "I really don't like it when you make commentary about my ice cream habits," because my body will hold me accountable. I'm allergic to dairy. It will hold me accountable. I don't need anybody else to do it. If I say, "I don't like it when you talk about my ice cream habits," and then this person continues to do it, I have to be accountable to myself. They're going to keep doing what they're doing, but I'm going to check in with my body and be like, "Ooh, time to swipe some more on Bumble." That's where I'm headed with this. So it is that sort of natural set of consequences that can come from this too. Accountability isn't always, "You did something I don't like, I'm going to lecture you now." It's like, "All right, So I see what you're up to. What do I need? Am I aligned with that? Now I make some moves.
I'm thinking how accountability and boundaries are so linked together, as Meg just beautifully pointed out. And I'm also thinking about how accountability gets modeled. So I think I'm gonna switch topics a little bit. I hope that's okay. But I'm thinking about my Girl Scout troop, which are first and second graders. As you can imagine, it gets a little wild and wacky. And one sort of value we're trying to teach the girls is being accountable to their other Girl Scouts, right? Because we are working in a group, because we're all working towards a common goal. If one person or two people are acting wild, and we can't move forward until everyone's on the same page. So we're modeling how to keep ourselves accountable and also how to keep each other accountable, but in a boundaried way, right? Not in a you have to do this, you have to do this, but sort of like the rest of us are being quiet. Are you gonna jump on board, or what's your plan?
And I was actually also, while you were talking, I was typing some notes because I don't want to forget how this relates to what you're saying. Okay, so let's take a step back. We've said that for the most part, we are accountable to ourselves. That's like sort of the headline here. And then there's like this murky stuff where there may be times where someone in our life says, I'd like you to hold me accountable. Right, well, then by request, maybe I will hold another person accountable. But again, the headline here is mostly we are accountable to ourselves. And Elizabeth has mentioned now, and even as you were introducing yourself a little bit, the way that we might be held accountable in organizations or systems or groups to which we belong. And I still think those are groups like the Girl Scouts, perhaps, or your profession, perhaps, or whatever it is, groups that you belong to that hold you accountable, but with your consent and participation and your agreement. Like, everybody decides, I think I'd like to be a Girl Scout, so I'm going to let the group hold me accountable to standards because I choose to be a part of this group where that's what we do. Or I want to be a licensed social worker, and I know that means I'm going to be held to some standards, and I'm okay with that because I want to be a licensed social worker. So sign me up. I want to be held to those standards. So again, there may be times where we are held accountable, not just to ourselves, but to a profession or to a group or to a community. But I'd like to think for the most part, these are groups and communities that we want to belong to. So there's an element of agreement or consent that I'm not just being forced to be held accountable. I suppose some folks listening might be thinking, well, what about the police? They hold us accountable. Yeah, but I don't know. Am I stretching this to say they hold us accountable to a society that we want to belong to, that we want to be a part of? I think there's still an element of, I want to be a part of this community, so I understand that that means I have to follow the law, and that means the police will hold me accountable if I don't follow the law. Thoughts?
As a former sociology major in college, approximately 107 years ago, yeah, I mean, I think even without a formal justice system, even without a formal set of guidelines, you can look throughout human history and see that whatever society has always agreed on some rules, whether they're spoken or unspoken, and some accountability to each other, because that's how we survive, right? Whether it's a formal group or an informal group, the reason that groups work is because we all sort of have an agreement about how we're going to act and what the goal is.
I agree with that. And I think that appears in families too. Like if you think about family stories where, a particular family might say, well, like you're a Smith and Smiths behave this way. Like we expect this and I feel like I hear that a lot with people who are saying, well, I'm a Rogers, you're a Rogers. Rogers show up to school and they try hard and they do their homework, right? So this can be a little bit more of a a power dynamic that comes into play too. But then it gets to shift as people age and things change. But sometimes those storylines carry through even as things shift. And I think that's a nice way to think about, how does my identity play into this? And back to like, it is both personal and it is public at the same time. And if you get to a point where being a Smith or being a Rogers in that particular way doesn't work for you, you can figure it out. People have less of a choice when it comes to being a citizen of a particular country or place often, but they can still find their groups.
Meg, I love that you said something about a power dynamic. I think that's really important to talk about when it comes to accountability, because it's true that, for instance, with my Girl Scouts, like they're little kids. They're accountable to me because I'm a grown-up in the room, right? They sometimes forget this, but they are aware that they have to be accountable to grown-ups. And I think that power dynamic is really important to recognize when we're talking about accountability, because it does get murkier as we get older, right?
Yeah, I think it's a really good way back to something we said a while ago, and I wanted to make my way back there. So you're helping me get back there, Elizabeth. Um, I still believe that in this world, when we have relationships, we are accountable to ourselves. And when someone else is behaving in a way that is really not acceptable to me or makes me feel unsafe or uncomfortable or disrespected, sometimes the words we say are things like, I'm going to hold you accountable. And it doesn't really go well because guess what? You don't really have power over other people. So in that power dynamic, you could try all you want to assert that, like, I'm in charge here, but like, good luck, because in messy adult relationships, you don't just get to say, hey, hon, I don't think you should have ice cream tonight. Guess what? Jessica's going to eat all the ice cream she wants to eat, whether he likes it or not. But to this point of like, I'm accountable to myself. Well, that means I won't accept a lot of behavior from people that make me feel like I have less dignity than them, or I'm smaller than them, or I'm being disrespected. But that's not because I'm going to hold them accountable. It's because I'm accountable to myself. So that means it's up to me then to make it clear what my needs are. And if my needs cannot be met, I have to remove myself. But I cannot force other people to meet my needs because I don't have power over them.
This makes me think of an example that we were discussing a little bit earlier, which is a, a policy I've had to implement at work recently. So we've had a really vicious cold and flu season, as Elizabeth will attest firsthand. And I get paid for hourly work, basically. Like if I do a session, I get paid, and if as a therapist, and if I don't do a session, I don't get paid. So it's really important that I stay healthy and that people in my family stay healthy for all of the other reasons that they have. So I've always had a sick policy where like if you're sick, you're not supposed to come into the office. But this past year, because I think things have loosened up in other public spaces, people have been pushing that more. So I had to make explicit in my sick policy, please don't come with sniffles, cough, cold symptoms, in addition to flu and all of the other things, because I'll send you home. And if I have to send you home twice, we will have to discontinue working together. And I had every client that comes in person sign that because I've actually had to implement it and use it. And so that's an example of I could feel some very significant consequences coming my way if I didn't stand up for myself. I do want to help people. I care about these people. And in the world of technology in which we live, there's no reason why we can't have a telehealth appointment once in a while if somebody's under the weather and they really want to have the appointment. Or better yet, they should take a nap and rest and work on helping their body feel better. And importantly, they don't get to decide when it's okay to expose me to illness. I had to set that parameter myself. So if I'm going to think about that in like a family dynamic situation, that's also like you get to decide, if I have a family member who constantly wants to borrow money from me over and over again, and I don't like how they spend it. I get to decide if I'm still going to do that or if there's a point at which I no longer engage with that. So I wonder what y'all think.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a good example of being accountable to yourself, Meg, because you might make the request, right? Like, please don't come into the office if you have the sniffles or you're sick. And if somebody disregards that request, you maybe have a little wiggle room to say, please don't do that again. But I like that what you're saying is if I notice a pattern of you disregarding my needs, then I know I can't control you. I know I can't really stop you from doing it 100 more times. So rather than exhausting myself trying to get you to stop coming in here and get you to respect me, the decision is, well, just discontinue this relationship because I know that I can't, quote unquote, get you to change your ways, but I am accountable to myself. So I will sever this relationship rather than exhausting myself trying to get you to do something that I want you to do.
I think too, this is a great point to talk about accountability and the sort of unspoken rules, or sometimes spoken. Of course, I totally agree with you, Meg, but I also am thinking about places I've worked, toxic places I've worked, where the expectation was even if you're sick, you come to work because we're short-staffed. Like, sorry about it. And how bad that was, number one, for public health, but also for morale. But how implicit and insidious that accountability can be, right? Like maybe you can't actually get in trouble for not coming to work if you're sick, but there will be some sort of consequences, right? And it's all sort of murky because there are laws and rules and, you know, class action lawsuits at one place I worked at about sickness and sick time. But there's also this sort of like capital A accountability force field of like, you know, you matter less than whatever the situation at work is. So I think it's also important to talk, you know, Megan, Kate and I are so lucky we work for ourselves. We get to make up our rules and our guidelines. But I know for many people, like accountability to yourself comes last when it comes to other parts of your life.
I appreciate Elizabeth sharing that. And I just, as I was hearing you speak about it, I just felt exhausted, you know, and I think about that overall impact that can have. And if people are filing class action lawsuits, et cetera, they are exhausted, like bone tired by it. So this is one of those spaces where like this is worth shifting as a culture if we can. And we have kind of had the opportunity to start to talk about these things with the pandemic having happened. But continued accountability is important because just because it is this way with these implicit understandings doesn't mean it has to be that way. So for those of us who have the opportunity to create change in our particular work context, I really think we should, because eventually it will make possible that other people who don't have the power to do that can start to experience that, because the people who make those rules will have experienced it in other positions too, or other locations too. So it's a bummer and I hope it changes. And I think we all should be accountable to ourselves and doing what we can to change it.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's actually interesting the conversation has gone to policies as a way of asserting some kind of accountability, I guess. I was thinking about, you know, Elizabeth, you mentioned how all three of us work for ourselves. So we all have been in a position of writing policies for our workplaces. And one policy at my workplace that I implemented was no one may join a virtual meeting while driving. And so if you log into Zoom and it's clear that you're behind the wheel, I ask you to leave and we will reschedule the meeting. And you wouldn't believe how many people go, no, 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 it's fine. It's fine. I'm okay. I'm upright. It's fine. And I say, this isn't your decision. There is a policy, and the policy is that you cannot join Zoom meetings while you're driving. It is a safety concern, but also like we're not nearly as productive while you're watching the road and you can't see that I'm sharing my screen and we can't get things done. And so I have had to just remove people from Zoom who are insisting, no, I'm fine. No, I'm okay. And I've had to be like, it just isn't your decision. So goodbye. Like I exit them out of the room or just close the meeting down. Anyway, I didn't expect that we would go to the place of like office policies, but I do think there's a lot of interesting stuff in there about how we establish those kinds of expectations.
I want to share another example too of school because my kids are in public school and it is the law that they go to school. And obviously I support that as a person in the world. But as I have said, everyone in our house has been sick. So my older daughter missed a couple days and I got a call from the attendance office, which is their job. But it was one of those like catch-22. On the one hand, like she can't miss too many days of school, but also don't send her to school sick. And so then the accountability becomes murky, right? So like, how well does she have to be for me to send her? How accountable am I to the other parents who I know also don't want to have to miss work and school when their kids get germs? They're not wearing masks at school anymore. They're always touching each other. They're gross. How accountable am I to the other parents, and how accountable am I to my own kid, to the school district's rules? Accountability is not so cut and dry all the time, I think, is what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah. Yeah, and as soon as I heard you say, like, how accountable am I to the other parents? I don't know, I took a little pause in some of the stuff that we've been saying, and I was like, it's true that, like, I know I'm the one who said 10 minutes ago, the headline here is I'm accountable to myself. That's the main title, and then there's subtitles. I don't know, I also just really appreciate, Elizabeth, that you're feeling accountable to the other parents and their homes and their well-being. And so I don't think I'm changing my mind. We are still primarily accountable to ourselves, but maybe throughout our conversation, I'm starting to realize how we are accountable to those groups that we mentioned is maybe much more powerful than I originally made it sound.
It makes me think about, again, maybe back to groups that we choose. Ideally, we're in a position where we are wanting to make the groups that we're in better, healthier, happier, more successful, in whatever way that is, and that our personal values and morals align with that, so that we can do both at the same time.
Well, it would be silly of me to open this up as we are probably winding down, but I feel like the elephant in the room might be, what if you live in a society right now and you want to be a part of this society and the rules are all changing really rapidly and scary ways, and your personal code of ethics says some of the rules of this society are not the ones I want to be following? Listen, I'm not really asking anyone to respond to that. I'm honestly trying to wrap us up and say goodbye. So, like, that's too big. That's too much. I also suspect the three of us may not have all the answers on that one, but it would also be wrong, I think, to just hit end on this recording without mentioning that very complicated layer that I think a lot of people around the world are experiencing. Not just in the United States where we live, but I think sometimes in the United States, we tend to think we're the only ones feeling that way. There's a lot of parts of the world right now where your government might be implementing a set of rules that you don't agree with. So my new pattern on this podcast is I end every episode figuring out what the next one should be. So there's another topic for another day, which is, what if we're being held to some standards that we are not at all comfortable with? Maybe we do an episode on some healthy rebellion, and navigate that one together. What do you say, folks?
I love that idea. I was just thinking that, like, one of my supervisees told me her personal motto is, I will follow the rules unless I think they're stupid, and then I'm going to break them. And that's how I like to live my life.
Yeah, well, I have to say, a motto I'm having to throw away. A motto I once lived by was, follow the rules until you can change the rules, and then change the rules so that they're better. But when the rules have become so horrific, that doesn't work anymore. And so I might have to adopt the one that you've mentioned, Elizabeth. So yeah, we'll come back together for healthy rebellion. That might be a good topic to talk about. How to help the world by rebelling.
Take me in your arms. I don't want to miss a day without you. Let's stay young forever. There is nothing we can't do. And nothing can break us apart when we're together. Facing the sky, we know that day I live in a dream.